change. Euronews. All views.
Good morning, Europe. It's Wednesday, the 6th of June. Our top stories this hour: a village buried. New pictures show the massive devastation of that Guatemala volcano, while the death toll continues to climb. Plus, from theCUBE, our social media news desk,
we'll bring you accounts of rescue workers digging through burning hot ash in the desperate search for the missing.
On a roll, one last vote before Italy's new populist government takes power. We're on the road in southern Italy talking to supporters of the Five-Star Movement. Jordan unrest, the largest protests in years over a new tax bill criticized for targeting the poor. And from Japan to San Francisco, the French swimmer aiming to become the first to cross the Pacific. Thank you for starting your day with us. We begin with new explosions and new evacuations around Guatemala's Fuego volcano. At least 75 people have been killed and nearly 200 more are missing. Rescue crews are frantically searching for anyone who may be buried alive. Our journalist Evelyn Laverick has the latest.
Drone footage of Guatemala's ash-covered landscape. Below is what was once the vibrant town of El Rodeo. The rising death toll following the eruption of the Fuego volcano is expected to go on rising, knowing that anyone stuck in the buried houses has little chance of being alive. A new eruption on Tuesday sent rescue workers and firefighters scrambling for cover. It's only now becoming clear the extent of the numbers of people who could be missing. This woman says she thinks she's lost around 36 family members, including aunts, uncles and cousins. About half are children. The authorities say more than 1.7 million people have been affected by the eruption, with more than 3,000 having been evacuated, and that could increase as more people decide to leave the area. No one feels safe. Evelyn Laverick, Euronews.
The bravery of the rescue workers, as we saw in that story, is being widely praised on social media, but the dangers of fresh eruptions is really threatening their work. Alex in theCUBE has more on this story.
Absolutely, Tessa. The conditions on the ground after these eruptions are incredibly dangerous. Even after this pyroclastic flow, which filled these villages and towns with ash and debris, has stopped, what it's left behind is burning hot ash. Look at this. This is a video showing rescue workers dousing their boots. Look at the steam coming off that. Because the ground is so hot, they are having to stop their boots from melting so they can keep digging and keep looking for survivors. This image here from a local journalist shows them taping up their boots. And in the caption, he says they're having to perform miracles in order to keep the shoes on their feet as they go on searching desperately for the missing and the dead. And look how difficult that is. This is the scene shared here by our colleague at NBC, Gabe, who's there for us. This shows the devastation that ash, which is still burning hot, caused. Vehicles piled up, buildings destroyed. And you can see how it has buried El Rodeo, this village here. And even for those who have survived the eruption, lives have been irreparably damaged. This is a young baby here in a makeshift shelter, but there are thousands now not knowing where they're going to go or when they can go home. And for those performing these heroic efforts, these heroic rescues, just look at the impact it's having on them. This is a firefighter walking away from El Rodeo. He is in tears here, being consoled by his colleague there. The scenes they are seeing, what they are having to go through, it's a hugely upsetting story, but their heroism and their bravery being widely praised online.
Indeed, a lot of images and devastating images coming from there. Thank you for that, Alex. Let's head over to the UK now, where the Israeli Prime Minister is winding up his three-day European tour. Benjamin Netanyahu will meet British Prime Minister Theresa May today and is expected to continue his efforts to persuade Europe's powers to pull out of the Iran nuclear deal. Our correspondent Vincent McAveney is covering the story for us from London. Hi there, Vincent. So what are we expecting from the talks today?
Good morning, Tessa. Well, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu finishes his European tour today in London with meetings at Downing Street with Prime Minister Theresa May and the Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson. Now, when he set off on this trip on Monday, he said he wanted to talk to European leaders about two things, Iran and Iran. Well, he's already done that in Berlin with Chancellor Merkel and yesterday in Paris with President Macron. All three of those European leaders have been very strong in their defense of the Iran deal. They all personally lobbied President Trump, and when he did withdraw, they all issued a joint statement condemning it. But speaking yesterday in France, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says they now must accept that the deal has failed.
I didn't ask France to withdraw from the JCPOA because I think the JCPOA is basically going to be dissolved by the weight of economic forces. My interest is not this or that agreement. My interest is to make sure that Iran doesn't have nuclear weapons.
Now, sources at the Foreign Office here in Whitehall tell me that they're trying to keep this visit low-key. It's just a meeting. There's no joint press conference or joint event. That's because it's slightly trickier than those previous meetings that Benjamin Netanyahu has had, because the UK has called on the UN to launch an investigation into the use of live rounds by the Israeli army against protesters who are unarmed in Gaza. You may remember last month, on the day that the US opened its new embassy in Jerusalem, some 58 Palestinians were killed and thousands were injured when the Israeli army opened fire. Now, just before the meeting today that the Prime Minister will have, she has to come here to the House of Commons for her weekly Prime Minister's Questions. Jeremy Corbyn, the Labour leader, is an arch critic of Israel. He will be raising these incidences and no doubt putting pressure on the Prime Minister to speak to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu about it. So it may be a somewhat tricky meeting for Theresa May today.
Indeed. Thank you for that, Vincent McAvenny, live in London. Now, amid the biggest protests in years, Jordan's King Abdullah is moving to quell anger over a planned income tax law. Well, he's appointed a former World Bank economist to form a new government. This as thousands take to the streets to protest price increases. Tocumbo Salako has the story.
It's a sight rarely seen in Jordan. Thousands on the streets for nearly a week now, the largest protest the kingdom state has experienced in years. Since Saturday, anger has been growing over a controversial new tax law, which many say will worsen the plight of poorer Jordanians and squeeze the middle class. Protesters have also criticized politicians for squandering public funds and corruption.
I want a better future, honestly. I want different decisions. I want a government that cares about people, not just money and businesses, you know. I want an environment that's inclusive for everyone.
Harvard-educated Omar Al-Razaz, seen here on the left, has been tasked with forming a new government in a bid to appease the protesters. King Abdullah has called for the new government to conduct a full review of the country's tax system. He also wants a dialogue over the planned income tax bill, which has approval from Jordan's chief lender, the IMF. Western allies look on with concern, waiting to see if the changes will diffuse the anger. Jordan, which is a staunch US ally with a peace treaty with Israel, has remained the one stable country throughout years of regional turmoil. Tocumbo Salako, Euronews.
In the Czech Republic, thousands of people are protesting the reappointment of the prime minister. Crowds assembled around the country after it emerged that the party led by Andrej Babiš is to form a government that would rely on support from the communists. There's also tension over Babiš's alleged collaboration with former communist-era secret police. Protesters are calling for his resignation. A new report from Amnesty International says U.S.-led coalition forces may have broken international law in the Syrian city of Raqqa. It claims that U.S., British and French forces caused unnecessary civilian harm while targeting ISIS. The coalition denies the claim. Argentina has called off a World Cup warm-up match against Israel amid rising political pressure. The match was supposed to take place this Saturday in Jerusalem, but the team and its star player Lionel Messi had faced calls to cancel the game over Israel's treatment of Palestinians in Gaza. Well, news of the cancellation celebrated in Gaza, where protesters had been burning Messi T-shirts ahead of the game. He's been the American ambassador to Germany for just a month, but Richard Grenell is already causing a stir over recent comments about conservatives in Europe. And now he has a meeting with Germany's foreign minister where that will most certainly come up. Our correspondent Jessica Saltz is at the foreign ministry in Berlin. Jessica, can you tell us about the comments and the reaction?
Well, Richard Grenell has been causing political outcry in Germany by publicly criticising German politics on Twitter and in the media. In a recent interview with Breitbart, he said he wants to empower conservatives in Europe. He also took aim at Angela Merkel's migration policy and criticised the German military. Now, German politicians across the spectrum are hitting back and accusing Grenell of meddling in domestic politics. Martin Schulz of the Social Democrats and Sarah Wagenknecht of the left-wing party Die Linke are just two of the several politicians who believe that Grenell should be fired over his comments.
And why are people so concerned about these comments?
Well, aside from Grenell criticising German politics, the main concern is that he seems to be pushing a really strong conservative message, which he really shouldn't be allowed to do, because as an ambassador he should remain politically impartial. And there's concerns that this conservative message, which reflects that of Donald Trump in the United States, could be empowering populist forces in Europe, such as the Alternative for Germany in Germany, as Roderick Kiesewetter from the CDU explained to me.
Yeah, it's very difficult and very dangerous, because he could become a kind of advocate of right-wing and left-wing populist politicians who would like to destroy our free society.
So the real question in Germany is Richard Grenell just a provocateur, or do his words have some more serious influence?
All right, thank you for that, Jessica Saltz, live in Berlin. And still to come for you on Good Morning Europe, as a Eurosceptic government takes shape in Rome, our Italian road trip continues. We talk to supporters of the populist five-star movement, and from the Cube, our social media news desk.
Why a man is swimming 9,000 kilometers through shark-infested waters. But first, here's your weather.
The Europe Weather Report is brought to you by
Incredible India.
The Europe Weather Report was brought to you by
Incredible India.
You're watching Good Morning Europe. Our top story this morning, a new explosion from Guatemala's Fuego volcano. At least 75 people have now been killed and many others have been forced from their homes. Rescuers continue their search for the hundreds who are still missing. Now, a French swimmer is looking to become the first person to cross the Pacific Ocean. So he set off yesterday from Japan on his way to San Francisco. Alex from theCUBE has more on the story.
Absolutely, Tessa. We love a social media story here in the social news desk of Euronews, theCUBE. Our team are tracking this swim, as you can, because Ben Lecomte, the swimmer, is posting every step of his journey on social media. I want to start with this, one of his latest posts, in which he says yesterday, on his very first day, he was checked out by 2 sharks, one of which swam underneath him, having a good look at him. Now, he is supposed to be wearing a shark repellent bracelet, so you could say maybe it seems to be working. Anyway, it's a long swim he's having to undertake. So why is he putting himself through this? This is the reason. The Great Pacific Garbage Patch. His swim will take him through this mass of floating rubbish in the Pacific Ocean. It's more than double the size of France, and a recent report suggests it is growing. Ben Lecomte is trying to highlight the effect of plastic pollution, and he's getting a lot of attention, even from Leonardo DiCaprio here, praising his swim, which is highlighting this plastic pollution in the ocean. And as we say, we'll be tracking his swim across the time it's going to take him. Let us know your thoughts on this and any story we're covering using hashtag theCUBE.
Interesting. Thank you for that, Alex. Now, Italy's new populist government is just one step away from being fully in power.
Favorevoli 171.
Between the far-right League and the anti-establishment Five-Star Movement won its first confidence vote in the Senate on Tuesday. All it needs now is a green light from the lower house, where it holds a larger majority. The vote is scheduled for later today. And before the vote, Giuseppe Conte gave his first speech as Prime Minister. Our journalist Alastair Sanford joins me now to give us the highlights. Alastair, what did he have to say in this?
Well, Tessa, to some extent, Giuseppe Conte ticked all the boxes for the supporters of the Five-Star and the League. He said that we're proud to be populist if that means listening to people's needs. There was an attack on the EU's immigration policy. He said they wanted to be softer on Russia. He said they'd look to boost the economy through growth and not through austerity. If there was a surprise, is that there was, well, for a start, nothing on pension reform or lowering the retirement age. And above all, in a 70-minute speech, there was no mention of this controversial question of Euro membership. You know, will they or won't they look to stay in the Euro? The only reference to that came at the end of the parliamentary debate, not the speech. And then Conte repeated the coalition's assurance over the last few days that there's no question of leaving the single currency. He said, we have to reiterate it, leaving the Euro has never been considered, and it's not being considered.
Having said that, though, is he still on a collision course with the EU? I mean, that seems to be moving back a bit.
We can certainly expect clashes, even if not a headlong collision, perhaps. There were some soothing noises about Europe being our home, talking about negotiations. Incidentally, Jean-Claude Juncker and the Eurogroup president got in a preemptive strike, saying stop treating the euro as an experiment. Yes, there are concerns over the coalition government's high spending plans. There are some signs they don't want to bring everything in at once, so that may reassure investors. There's an interesting question, though. It's not just a case of Italy against the EU, but how united will the coalition be within itself? Because some of their demands, frankly, contradict each other. Where will they be united on things like nationalism and certainly on challenging the EU's budget rules? To what extent remains to be seen.
Again, something to watch. Thank you, Alastair Sanford, for that. This new populist alliance has put the spotlight on Italy's economic and social gripes. Well, this week, our correspondents Elena Cavallone and Brian Carter are driving across the country to hear people's expectations. Their latest stop is the town of Tito in the south. Here's their report.
So, Brian, we are leaving Naples, but where are we going?
We're going to the region of Basilicata to meet Sergio. Sergio is a truck driver I met in the past while doing a story about the working conditions in road transport, an issue he's very concerned about. And he's also a very active militant of the Five-Star Movement, and so is his whole family.
The movement looks at the future, at the environment, at public schools, at public water, at the circular economy. The movement is the future. It is close to the citizens. It listens to the citizens.
Sergio, what do you think about the alliance between the Five-Star Movement and the League?
I see it as a mathematical agreement. I do not agree with all of the positions of the League, in particular with Salvini's method, the extreme right method. Extremism has never worked well. Today's politics is not deciding my future, but deciding my children's future. And they must be able to perceive a world as it will become, and what policies will be in their interest. These are all the activists from the Five Star Movement. We meet in this way. These meetings are the essence of the movement. Immigration must be controlled. Those who have the right to remain can stay. Those who cannot stay must go home. We cannot have criminals everywhere.
Ordinary people like us need to solve everyday problems, and in the Five Star Movement, we saw the only hope to solve them. They offer common-sense solutions.
Italian debt is the third largest in the world. Not in Europe, but in the world. And it was not created by citizens.
What struck you the most?
What impressed me the most is that people that now vote for Five Star movements, they used to vote for other parties from the left side or the right side. It's because this movement attracts people that cares about different topics such as social inequalities and environmental issues, and Basilicata has a lot of problems in that sense.
Che il movimento non cambi di una sola virgola, che continui.
As we say in our jargon among the militants of the Five Star Movement, let's keep the bar straight and our hearts high.
Well, Brian and Elena will be continuing their trip tomorrow in Milan, getting more Italian voices for you. And still to come on Good Morning Europe, cleaning up his image. Was this a PR stunt or was it a genuine helping hand from the Dutch Prime Minister? But first, let's look at your weather.
A dairy cow that talks to farmers. What kind of sorcery is that? It's not the magic wand kind. It's the RFID collar and Internet of Things kind we created with Chidley Dairy. So every cow can let farmers know how she feels and what she needs to be healthier. All with a simple text. Ta-da! Magic can't make digital transformation happen, but we can. That's the power of VMware, part of Dell Technologies.
You're watching Good Morning Europe. Welcome back. Next is a video that has you talking this morning. Was it a helping hand? Was it a PR stunt? That is the question, right, Alex?
Absolutely. In case you missed it, here is that video on our Euronews Instagram feed. Mark Rutte, the Prime Minister there, the Dutch Prime Minister, walking into Parliament when he spills his coffee. You know, first thing, and you can excuse someone doing that. We all do it first thing in the morning, I'm sure. But he's getting praised because rather than leaving the mess there, he picks up a mop, he doesn't let the cleaners do it, and he cleans up the mess himself. Here he is grabbing that mop. And some people saying, wow, what a wonderful example of true leadership this is showing. And it certainly got you commenting on our Facebook. Good attitude, says Pablo underneath the Euronews Facebook article. Leonardo here saying Dutch politicians are like this because it reflects Dutch society. It's not convinced everyone, however. Sandra suggesting here that maybe it could be something to do with cameras being there, and that could happen in France if there were journalists on hand.
I wonder what you would do, Alex. Anyway, thank you for that. And thank you for joining us on Good Morning Europe. And do stay with Euronews for more. In the meantime, we'll leave you with today's no comment from Guatemala, where rescue efforts continue after that devastating volcanic eruption.
Ay, tan chula mi niña, por Dios. Llega.
This week on Euronews. Visiting Georgia is an experience in time and space. You can discover historic cities and ancient traditions, huge, unspoiled landscapes. But above all, you'll be captivated by the authentic and surprising atmosphere of a country that may be small, but has lots to offer. All of this in postcards this week on Euronews.
The World Weather Report is brought to you by
Incredible India.
The World Weather Report was brought to you by
Incredible India.
What comes to your mind when you think of the Middle East?
A place where business and culture are coming together to make a bridge between East and West? Well, from here we'll bring you our flagship regional program, Inspire Middle East. We'll bring you incredible stories, connect you with the influencers whose innovations are driving business, technology and the arts to create that vibe that is so very Middle East of the future. Be inspired and join us on Inspire Middle East every Friday on Euronews and Euronews.com.